Born of a Canadian glacier, it's the fourth largest river in North America. For 1,243 miles, it runs steadfastly, draining some 260,000 square miles of land in 7 states and 1 province. Just before it reaches the ocean, the Columbia River casts off this prosaic persona. For a magical 70-mile stretch, it transforms itself and the land around it into something completely unexpected. Something at once magical and mysterious. Something overwhelmingly gorgeous. The Columbia River Gorge began forming some 12 to 18 million years ago. Melting ice glaciers created a huge lake which covered an immense area of Idaho and Montana. When a natural dike broke, millions of tons of water rushed toward the sea in an event geologists call Brett's Flood. This wall of water surged through lava flows produced by the Cascade volcanoes, and after eons of erosion, the gorge was born. These natural processes required millennia to transpire, but the most abrupt transformation of the gorge has occurred over the last several decades of human habitation. Hard evidence of a Native American presence in the region dates back some 13,000 years to a pair of sandals discovered at Fort Rock, Oregon. But it is believed that people from Asia crossed the Bering Strait into the New World much earlier, about 25,000 years ago. An ancient petroglyph or rock carving on a wall of the gorge known as Sisagiglalal, or She Who Watches, has witnessed much of this migration, silently observing as her people grew and their culture flourished. The Columbia River tribes were part of the Plateau Indian group. This lesser-known band ranged from Central Oregon north to British Columbia, between the Rockies and the Cascades. They thrived in this abundant land with food literally for the taking. Deer and elk, geese and duck, berries and roots, all were in plentiful supply. But it was the salmon that was at the core of their food supply. Columbia River salmon runs were so vast, so reliable, that the Indians elevated the fish to a spiritual status. The Columbia River was also the tribe's main east-west route through the region. The Caribou Trail in the foothills of the eastern slope of the Cascades was the major north-south path. At the crossroads of these 2 trails lie Celilo Falls, the center of this prodigious Native American culture. A major meeting place and historic fishing site. It was also known as Tum Tum, or Tumwater, the sound of the heart. Not far from Celilo Falls, another meeting place emerged for a wholly different tribe of people. A people who by their very nature were at odds with that of the Indian. It was called Fort Dalles, but it was better known as the end of the Oregon Trail. The great influx of settlers during the 1840s and 1850s quickly enlarged the population of Fort Dalles, and a city was born. Here, pioneer families boarded rafts to transport themselves, their covered wagons, and all their worldly possessions to the fertile Willamette Valley just downriver. These treacherous waters were the final test of the strong and the lucky. Many never saw the promised land. As more and more immigrants populated the land surrounding the gorge, the technology of the Industrial Revolution soon followed. The water resources of the Columbia were quickly exploited. Irrigation works diverted water to new farmlands. Water wheels powered new sawmills and grist mills. Fish wheels harvested the massive salmon runs. Canneries sprung up on the shoreline. And steamboats, not canoes, ruled the water. A little more than 100 years after Lewis and Clark first discovered the great river of the West in 1804, one of the largest concentrations of Native Americans on the continent had all but vanished. The pristine face of the gorge was changed forever. Today, the Columbia is one of the most developed river systems in the world. Yet much of it is still natural and pristine in its grandeur. Nowhere is this more apparent than the gorge. It is a land of contrasts. In little over an hour by car, one moves from the marine-influenced lush green forests of the western Cascades to the sage and juniper-studded buttes of Oregon's high desert. The Columbia River Gorge extends approximately from Troutdale to the Dalles on the Oregon side and from Washougal to Goldendale on the Washington side, some 70 miles total. The 1986 Columbia River Gorge Scenic Act designated and preserved 280,000 acres as a national scenic area. As you drive the highway on the Oregon side, it's easy to understand why. But I-84 whisks you along at interstate speeds, hardly the way to appreciate this ancient and wondrous land. For that, you need to fall back a bit in time and speed and travel the king of roads, the old Columbia Gorge Scenic Highway. Because the gorge is the only low-lying passage through the Cascades, many early roads were attempted. Would-be engineers gouged and scarred the terrain with bravado and blasting powder. But all were doomed to failure by the sheer obstacle the gorge presented and by their own lack of expertise. Then, in 1913, a young engineer named Samuel Lancaster entered the scene. Through the efforts and encouragement of people like Samuel Hill, Simon Benson, and John Yeon, the gorge would soon become passable to motor traffic. Lancaster was a sensitive man and deeply moved by the beauty of the gorge. He called it this mighty work of God, done in his own way, on a scale so great that man's best efforts appear but as the work of pygmies. He saw his mission not as one of conquest, but preservation. Our fondest dreams come true if we work intelligently, earnestly, and with motives that are pure, he said. The result was not so much a road, but a work of art. It was called a poem in stone, a highway in exquisite harmony with its surroundings. The Columbia Gorge Highway was formally dedicated at Crown Point on June 6, 1916. Today, a plaque at Crown Point commemorates the efforts and vision of Samuel Lancaster. Although only portions of the western and eastern ends remain, efforts are underway to restore this venerable byway to its former glory. Of what still survives, the old Columbia Gorge Highway is both a pleasure and an adventure to drive and explore. The most prominent feature of the highway is its waterfalls. At least 11 major falls are visible from the road or just a short hike from it. With names like La Tourelle, Bridal Veil, Coopy, Mist, and Joaquina, these cascades tumble joyously off the basaltic rock that forms the sheer walls of the gorge. The best known and the most often visited of these cataracts is Multnomah Falls. At 620 feet, this cascade is the highest in Oregon. A trail leads to a footbridge spanning the lower falls, then continues on to a high vantage point at the upper falls. Back at the base of the falls, interpretive displays point out the history, geology, and Indian legends of the gorge. The Multnomah Falls Lodge offers a tradition of fine dining and a gift shop. Throughout the gorge, an abundance of massive and unique rock formations rule. 30 million years of geologic history are visible on the walls of the gorge, in layer after layer of sandstone and basalt. Early settlers were so awed by the sheer massiveness of these giants that they gave them names with religious implications. Bishop's Cap, Beacon Rock, Rock of Ages, and St. Peter's Dome are just a few of the silent sentinels that still guard this ancient canyon. The Indians also viewed the gorge in spiritual terms. Legend has it that there once existed a great natural stone arch spanning the Columbia. It was called the Bridge of the Gods. One day, two sons of the Great Spirit, Y East, Mount Hood, and Pateau, Mount Adams, began fighting over a beautiful maiden. This angered the Great Spirit, so he destroyed the bridge and forever halted their battle. Today, that legend is echoed with a bridge of steel and concrete. The Bridge of the Gods at Cascade Locks, Oregon, provides motorists with spectacular passage to the Washington side of the gorge. Cascade Locks has a history of construction that predates the bridge. Initially, it was the site of an Indian village. Then, in 1897, the federal government built a series of locks to circumvent the worst rapids on the river. Known as the Cascades, these swift waters provided the surrounding mountains with their name. Today, the damming of the Columbia has tamed these rapids. But at Cascade Locks Marine Park, at the site of the old locks, is the original lock tender's residence. It has been converted into an historical museum containing relics from those bygone days. At the Sternwheeler Museum in the Visitors Center at Marine Park, learn about the paddle-wheeled boats that once ruled the Columbia for more than 70 years. Then board the Sternwheeler Columbia Gorge for a delightful 2-hour cruise to Bonneville Dam. Bonneville, along with the Grand Coulee Dam further up the Columbia, changed the face of the Pacific Northwest as permanently and as resolutely as did the arrival of the wagon trains. Begun by the Army Corps of Engineers in 1933, the dam commenced operations in 1937. It not only vastly improved the navigation of the Columbia, it harnessed another element of the mighty river, power. The availability of large amounts of inexpensive power attracted industry, created jobs, and signaled another surge of population. This was the final crushing blow to the Native American culture. Bonneville and the other dams that followed backed up the waters at the center of their society, flooding their ancestral hunting grounds, their fishing grounds, even their burial grounds. The sound of the heart was silenced, and the beat of the drum fell quiet. An end of an era had come, but a new one was being ushered in. At the Bonneville Visitor Center, historical exhibits relate the traditions of the tribes. Additional displays depict the navigational history of the Columbia, the dam's operation, and the story of fish migration. Through underwater glass viewing windows, fish can be seen making their way up the ladders. Bonneville supports a large fish hatchery at the site, an attempt to return the salmon to a river long since milked of its native runs. At the dam's navigational locks, both commercial and pleasure craft pass through. Boating is a popular form of recreation in the gorge. Everything from yachts to dinghies, sails to speedboats, cruise in an endless parade up and down the river. And where there are boats, there are people fishing. Although the runs of old are gone, there is still a diversity of good fishing on the Columbia and its tributaries. Salmon, steelhead, rainbow trout, even sturgeon make the area a fishing haven. Back on dry land, the most popular outdoor activity along the Columbia River Gorge is hiking. An extensive trail system boasts hundreds of paths above the gorge on both sides of the river. Each offers its own pleasures. For the more adventurous, the gorge offers rock climbers a variety of sheer faces and challenging ascents. About two-thirds through the gorge, where strong river currents confront stiff winds, a different group of thrill-seekers populate the city of Hood River. Boardheads invade every summer between May and October and take advantage of some of the best windsurfing conditions in the world. Spectators fill the Hood River Sail Park and Marina on any sunny day to soak up the sunshine and take in the action. As a result of this influx of people and money, Hood River has blossomed into a lively mix of restaurants, boutiques, and specialty shops. A short drive from this bustle, Panorama Point rewards with a spectacular view of the beautiful fruit orchards that have long been Hood River's economic mainstay. Then it's all aboard for an excursion on the Mount Hood Railway. This tour of the Hood River Valley is replete with stunning views of Mount Hood on the Oregon side and Mount Adams on the Washington side. After a busy day, relax at one of the premier hotels in Oregon, just outside Hood River. The Columbia Gorge Hotel, perched high on a cliff overlooking the gorge, recalls an earlier, more luxurious era. It was built by lumber baron and philanthropist Simon Benson, who said, "We've built good roads and invited the world to come, but have done nothing toward taking care of them after they arrive." Opened in 1921, this hostelry did more than take care of its guests. It pampered them with luxury. It quickly developed an international reputation and became a favorite escape for the rich and famous of the Jazz Age. It was rumored to be a romantic hideaway of Rudolph Valentino and Clara Bow. Today, the Columbia Gorge Hotel is a National Historic Landmark, totally restored to its former glory. The opulent, intimate atmosphere and meticulously landscaped grounds continue to play host to many a romantic interlude. And guests are still pampered as they take in the magnificence that is the gorge. East of Hood River, the forest thins, the climate changes, and the barren ridges stand in banded relief against sun-drenched azure skies. At Mosier, look toward the basaltic cliffs on the Washington side. In an unusual configuration called a geologic anticline, the land slants dramatically toward the river. It is also at Mosier that another section of the old Columbia Gorge Highway is preserved. The Rowena Loops ascend for 9 miles to Rowena Crest, the eastern analog of Crown Point. Part of Mayer State Park, this viewpoint offers a spectacular perspective of the drier end of the gorge. Not far from the parking lot, foot trails lead to Tom McCall Preserve, alive with spectacular wildflowers in the spring. This beautiful spot is named after a popular Oregon governor. Down the road from Rowena Crest is the Dalles, the end of the Oregon Trail. History pervades the Dalles everywhere you look. The Fort Dalles Museum contains artifacts of the early trappers and pioneers, while the old Wasco County Courthouse serves as the city's information center. Two 19th century churches, St. Paul's, built in 1875, and St. Peter's Landmark, erected in 1897, still stand, testament to the fervent beliefs held by those who settled here. Across the bridge, not far from the Dalles Dam, enter the Washington side of the gorge. Near the town of Goldendale, another piece of Northwest history stands guard high on the cliffs, Mary Hill. Begun by Samuel Hill in 1914 as part of a utopian agricultural community, this castle on the Columbia became better known as Castle Nowhere. Sam Hill was part visionary, part dreamer, and a full-time eccentric. A world traveler said to have circled the globe 7 times, he felt the best land and climate in the gorge must lie where the sunshine of the east meets the rain of the west. He was convinced he had discovered paradise. He promptly purchased 7,000 acres of land and dubbed it Mary Hill after both his daughter and wife. What he wound up with, however, was bad weather, isolation, and ultimately failure. But not before he acted on his convictions. Among Hill's many interests was a fascination with European royalty. It is said he began his ranch house, a Flemish-influenced chateau, as a proper setting to entertain his friend, King Albert of Belgium. But World War I broke out, and he never came. When it became apparent that the Mary Hill Agrarian Commune was forever to remain a dream, Hill decided to convert the building into a museum. In 1926, Queen Marie of Romania, another friend of Hill's, was invited to the dedication. She traveled from New York to Washington State to dedicate her friend's museum. The crowds arrived in droves just for a glimpse of honest-to-goodness European royalty. That was the high point for lonely Maryhill. The chateau wasn't open to the public until 1940. Today, visitors from around the world come to this secluded castle to admire the architecture, take in the scenery, and view the art. An extensive Native American collection features prehistoric rock carvings, baskets, beadwork, and other objects from the rich culture of the Columbia River tribes. The museum also offers a significant collection of the French father of modern sculpture, Auguste Rodin. More than 40 bronze, plaster, and terracotta pieces portray the emergence of a style that still influences artists today. The Queen Marie Gallery features exhibits of gilt furniture, jewelry, gowns, and other memorabilia of the fallen Romanian monarchy. Not far from the museum, at the original Maryhill town site, is another Sam Hill-inspired structure, a replica of England's Stonehenge. Hill, a pacifist, was horrified at the carnage of World War I. He built this monument for all those who were sacrificed during that great conflict. Continuing in a westerly direction, the Washington side of the gorge offers many fresh perspectives and interesting side trips. In this place of timeless beauty, steeped in rich history, take the time to relax and reflect. Play and explore. Refresh and renew. Let the power and majesty of the gorge take hold of your mind and uplift your soul. Then, at the end of the day, perhaps you'll voice a word that says it all. A single hushed statement that sings its praises simply and eloquently. Gorgeous.